My name is Alexis Cole, and I am 29 years old. If you had asked me a year ago what I wanted from life, I would have said, dirt under my nails, sun on my shoulders, and a harvest worth sharing. That was before inheriting Grandpa Theodore's 140-acre farm in Vermont turned my family into strangers I could barely recognize. Grandpa used to say the land knows who loves it. He built this place from a tired patchwork of scrub and an old farmhouse into a living organism. Vegetable rows like ribs, orchards like lungs, water lines that pulsed when the timers clicked on at dawn. I grew up in those rhythms. While my older sister, Daria, Harvard MBA, now an investment banker in Manhattan, flew to leadership camps and case study competitions, I spent every summer here, 6 to 22, June to August. It was the curriculum Grandpa trusted: soil chemistry, crop rotation, grafting applewood in late winter, how to nurse a sick hen without breaking your own heart. When he passed last year, he left the farm to me. Not to the family, not in a tidy split. To me. In his letter, he said the farm should belong to the one who understood that running it wasn't just a business, but a covenant. I read that line 3 times at the kitchen table, the maple top scored with decades of knife marks and seed catalogs. My parents, Magnus and Isolde, reacted like someone had pulled the rug out from under our history. Dad, a consultant who speaks fluent spreadsheet, kept repeating that Grandpa must have been confused at the end. Mom suddenly rediscovered her rural roots, the same woman who once called this place that muddy nightmare every time we drove up. But Daria's shock calcified into something colder. She arrived with a portfolio, not a pie, and started referring to the farm as a $2 million underperforming asset with upside. At first, the pressure was packaged as concern. Links to articles about young farmers failing. Sweetie, maybe just let Daria review your books, Mom texted, as if Daria could see the soul of the soil inside an Excel sheet. Dad sent me light reading. White papers on economies of scale, mechanization, chemical regimes masquerading as efficiency. Daria flew up for a weekend and walked the rows in her white sneakers, scanning like a lender assessing collateral. You're grossing what, 200K? She asked at the greenhouse door. After expenses, Alexis. There's a better way. The intervention dinner arrived like a subpoena. They all showed up early and took their usual seats at Grandpa's table. Daria plugged her laptop into my TV like she owned the wall. Slides, monoculture conversion, labor reduction strategies, developer interest, preliminary offers. She spoke briskly, confident cadence sharpened by Manhattan steel. We pivot to corn and soy, maximize acreage, contract with the right suppliers. Within 24 months, we can court a developer at 4 to 5 million. She didn't look at the sourdough I'd proofed for 16 hours, or the roast chicken from my heritage flock cooling on the counter. Her eyes were only for the screen. I'm not growing commodities, I said. I'm growing food. I sell to 3 local restaurants and run a CSA for 40 families. This land breathes because it's diverse. Daria didn't roll her eyes. She smiled, which was worse. You like the romance, Alexis, but romance doesn't service debt. Sign management rights over to me. You'll still own it, technically. I'll bring it into the 21st century. You can keep your little garden. I felt Grandpa's letter burning in my pocket. Everything you're calling outdated is what kept this soil alive, I said. If you turn this into a monoculture, you won't just make more money, you'll make the land smaller. Dad's face went the color of a bruise. You're being sentimental. We have a fiduciary duty to the family legacy. Mom's voice softened. We just want what's best for you, sweetheart. You're young. Let your sister handle the heavy lifting. Daria clicked to a slide labeled Projected Insolvency. Numbers don't lie. At your current scale, the best case is breaking even. Worst case, failure in 2 years. And Alexis, she leaned forward, gentle as a blade, farming is dangerous. So many things can go wrong. The sentence clipped through me like a cold wind. Is that a prediction? I asked. She tilted her head. It's a fact. I told them to leave. My voice shook, and then it didn't. I said the words people say when they understand that love without respect is just a prettier name for control. This is my home. You're not welcome here if all you see is a spreadsheet. Daria slid her contract across the table. I didn't touch it. Dad muttered something about ungrateful children. Mom's eyes filled. Daria gathered her laptop, kissed my cheek like a mercy, and whispered, "When you're ready to be realistic, you know my number." For a week after, I worked like prayer. Dawn chores, irrigation checks, transplanting tomatoes Grandpa and I had saved seed from 15 years ago. The farm answered back in small, familiar ways. New leaves, lifted heads, the soft shudder of water lines. But then, things tilted. The irrigation timers, serviced in spring, began resetting in the night. Zones opened at 3:12 a.m., soaking beds until water pooled and drowned young lettuce. The walk-in cooler, only 2 years old, died right before market day. I lost nearly everything I'd picked. The tractor's hydraulics failed twice in a week. In the greenhouse, a perfect grid of seedlings cooked when the ventilation system went still during a noon heat spike. One mistake is on me. 2 is bad luck. All of this at once felt like a hand on the back of my neck, pressing. Robert, 67, a farmhand in title, but the farm's living archive in truth, found me sitting on an overturned crate behind the barn, holding a tray of limp basil. "You look like the basil smells," he said, which made me laugh for the first time in days. "I keep telling myself it's just a cascade," I said. "One thing breaks, it dominoes." "Maybe," he said, "and maybe not." He wiped his palms on his jeans. "Been seeing tire tracks by the equipment shed at odd hours. Not ours. And that hole in the south fence? Cut clean. Deer don't use bolt cutters." Something inside me tightened like a wire. I think cameras ain't paranoia," he said gently. "They're memory when you're not awake." That night, as if answering a dare I hadn't spoken, the weirdness accelerated. My heritage tomatoes, the strain Grandpa babied through the 90s blights, woke up sick. Leaves blackened, lesions blooming in a pattern that screamed disease, except the airflow and copper sprays were textbook. The next morning, I found the chicken coop door ajar, the latch sprung. 12 birds lost, a fox's story written in feathers. On the third day, I came out to a glittering of fertilizer in the west plot, except when I watered, everything it touched went gray instead of green. That evening, my phone pinged, a number I recognized against my will. Marissa Vale, my boyfriend Ethan's ex. "Just checking in. Are you okay? Heard from a mutual in town you've been overwhelmed. Don't let pride wreck your life, Alex. Daria loves you. She's the responsible one." I stared at the message until the words lost their shapes. The timing wasn't an accident. It was choreography. I deleted the text and felt the silence after a door slams. "Ethan offered to drive up that night. I can be there in 3 hours," he said. "We'll check every line, every latch. You're not alone." I wanted to say yes, but some fights ask for fewer witnesses and more resolve. "Come this weekend," I told him. "I need to do one thing first." I drove into town before the feed store closed and bought what I could afford. 4 motion-activated cameras with night vision, extra SD cards, fresh locks for the sheds, a coil of chain that clanked like an omen in the passenger seat. Robert and I installed the cameras at dusk, his hand steady on the ladder, mine steadier than I expected. One at the coop, one tucked under the eaves near the equipment shed, one watching the apple orchard Grandpa called his cathedral, one aimed down the gravel lane where headlights sometimes bloomed and died at ungodly hours. When the last camera's red light winked awake, a strange calm settled over me. Not relief, not yet, but a line drawn in the dirt. The farm would remember for me while I slept. "Whatever's been moving at night," Robert said, tightening the last bracket, "we'll see it now." I looked out over the shadowed rows, the orchard standing like a congregation under the rising moon, and I said softly but out loud to the wind that threaded between the trees, "If you're here, I'll see you." I went inside, locked the door, and let the cameras keep watch. The footage came to me in fragments. 10 nights of wind, moths, and shadows, and one unthinkable truth hiding among them. Robert was the one who insisted we review everything together. He came to the farmhouse before sunrise, coffee in one hand, a tablet in the other. His face told me before the screen did. "Alexis," he said quietly, "you need to see this yourself." The first clip started at 2:43 a.m. The chicken coop camera flickered, grainy black and white. the motion sensor triggered by a shape slipping through the gate. Whoever it was moved with a strange confidence, avoiding the floodlights like someone who knew exactly where they were mounted. When the figure stepped briefly into view, the breath caught in my throat. It was Daria, clear as morning. My sister, in dark clothes and a baseball cap, sprinkling something into the feed bins. Her posture was businesslike, efficient, like she was conducting an audit, not committing sabotage. The second clip was worse. Orchard View, Thursday, 3:15 a.m. The same figure, wearing a backpack sprayer, methodically misting each of Grandpa's heritage apple trees. I could see the fine vapor settling on leaves that had been alive since before either of us was born. Robert tapped the screen. She's careful, knows what to hit, what to skip. That ain't random. The third clip made my stomach turn. Friday night, 1:30 a.m. The south fence, bolt cutters glinting faintly. After the gap opened, she scattered something on the ground. The next morning, deer tracks had led straight into my vegetable beds. And the fourth, that one nearly made me drop the tablet. Daria in the equipment shed, headlamp bright on her face, pouring something into the hydraulic tank of my tractor. She even checked her phone, scrolling, probably instructions. Then, as if the camera were a confessional, she spoke softly into her headset mic. It's done. The apple trees will be dead within a month. No, she'll never prove it. It'll look like disease. A pause. Then, laughing under her breath, Dad says to keep pressure on. Mom's handling the emotional side. By Christmas, she'll crack. The audio cut, but the sound stayed in my head like an echo. Robert exhaled through his teeth. I didn't want to believe it either, he said. But it's her, and she ain't working alone. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder thick with receipts. Found these behind the feed store dumpster. Someone didn't bother to shred. Inside, hardware store slips for herbicides, poisons, bolt cutters, all paid with Daria Cole's corporate credit card. I felt the farmhouse walls close in. She was trying to destroy Grandpa's legacy, I whispered. Not just the crops, me. Then we don't go at her angry, Robert said. We go at her smart. That's when I called Patricia Lynn, a college friend turned agricultural attorney. She drove up that night, rain hammering the windows while she spread papers across my kitchen table. After an hour, she looked up, pale and furious. Alexis, this is felony-level sabotage. Property damage over $100,000. Contamination of food supply. Conspiracy. If that tractor had failed while you were driving, we could be looking at attempted manslaughter. I nodded, numb. Patricia leaned forward. You want justice or control? Both, I said. But I want the truth to land where everyone can see it. So we built a plan. Robert documented every incident, timestamps, soil samples, the chemical composition of the fertilizer that killed my plants. Patricia contacted a private investigator who dug into Daria's meetings with developers. It turned out she'd already drafted preliminary sale contracts and even taken out a personal loan backed by expected inheritance. For a week, I lived in that strange duality, tending seedlings by day, assembling a legal war chest by night. My phone stayed silent except for Ethan's calls. Are you okay? He'd ask, and I'd answer truthfully, not yet, but getting there. When Patricia finally said, we're ready, I knew exactly what I wanted. We sent out invitations for Sunday dinner, just like before. My parents accepted immediately, relieved by what they assumed was surrender. Daria wrote back within minutes. Finally. Let's discuss the farm's future like adults. She arrived in her city-perfect blazer, champagne in hand. Alexis, she said, all smiles, I'm proud of you. I knew you'd see reason. I let them settle around the table. The same table where Grandpa taught me how to graft apple branches with steady hands. The same table where they once staged an intervention. I thought we'd start, I said, with a little presentation. Daria laughed. You're learning from the best. I turned on the TV. The first video rolled. No narration, no commentary, just Daria on the screen, caught in night vision, poisoning feed and spraying trees. Her recorded voice filled the room. By Christmas, she'll crack. My mother gasped. My father's jaw locked, then twitched. Daria shot to her feet. This is a deep fake. You think I wouldn't recognize editing? This is pathetic. No, said Robert from the doorway. His voice was quiet steel. I installed the cameras. I watched you. You forgot one thing about farmers, Miss Cole. We see everything. Patricia stood then, a folder in her hand. Ms. Cole, My name is Patricia Lynn, counsel for Alexis. What you've seen tonight constitutes multiple felonies: agricultural sabotage, destruction of property, conspiracy to commit fraud. We have receipts, chemical analysis, and witness testimony. You have two choices. She laid two documents on the table like cards. Option 1: we file charges Monday morning. You'll be arrested, likely convicted, and serve 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Option 2: you confess in writing, pay $500,000 restitution, and sign a permanent restraining order preventing contact with this property or Alexis. Choose now. My father sputtered. This is extortion. Patricia's voice was calm as a scythe. No, Mr. Cole, it's mercy. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then Mom turned toward Daria, tears streaking her foundation. You told us Alexis was failing. You said she was ruining the farm. Daria's control cracked. She was. This land could be worth millions, and she's out here playing farmer, raising weird chickens and selling tomatoes nobody wants. It's called feeding people, I said quietly. It's called honoring what built us. Robert stepped forward, holding another envelope. And this is the bill for what you destroyed. Daria's lip trembled. You can't prove... Patricia interrupted. We can. And if you force us, we will. The silence stretched. The clock ticked. The orchard light outside blinked once, twice, like Grandpa himself was waiting. Finally, DA. Daria's hand shook as she reached for the pen. She signed each line while her face emptied of color. When she handed the confession back, I saw it. The faintest flicker of shame, or maybe just defeat. Robert slipped the documents into a folder and nodded at me. It's done. I stood, my knees trembling not from fear anymore, but from release. Then you can leave, I said. All of you. My mother's sobs filled the doorway as they left. My father couldn't look at me. Daria turned at the threshold, her voice low, bitter. You think this is over? You'll regret making me your enemy. I looked her straight in the eyes. You already were. When their car lights disappeared down the drive, Patricia exhaled. You did it, she said softly. You chose control. I looked through the window at the orchard, the trees silhouetted in the silver wash of moonlight. Some of them would die, I knew that. But I also knew I'd plant new ones. Justice hadn't healed the land yet, but it had finally stopped the bleeding. The morning after the confrontation felt almost too still. No ringing phone, no headlights creeping up the drive, no concerned emails. Just sunlight pooling across the kitchen floor and the faint creak of the farmhouse settling. Patricia left before dawn to file the notarized confession with the county clerk and to secure the restitution agreement through the courts. Before she drove off, she gripped my hand and said, Alexis, they'll talk. Let them. You have the truth and the paper trail. By mid-morning, the first check arrived electronically. $500,000 in damages, paid in full from Daria's personal account. I stared at the confirmation for a long time, the digits blurred by tears I didn't expect. It wasn't triumph. It was grief, wearing the mask of relief. Robert poured 2 mugs of coffee and slid one across the table. You won, he said simply. No, I said. I just stopped losing. The news traveled faster than any harvest rumor. In a town this small, word of the Cole family sabotage spread through co-ops, diners, and tractor supply aisles like wildfire. At first, I feared judgment, that I'd be labeled dramatic, ungrateful, vindictive. But instead, something astonishing happened. Neighbors I barely knew showed up at the gate with pickup beds full of seed trays, compost, and good intentions. Your grandpa once fixed our irrigation pump without charging a dime, said Anthony Martinez, who ran an organic farm 10 miles north. This is just paying it forward. He left 20 heritage breed hens in a crate by the barn. Your flock's been hit hard, he said. Let's rebuild it. One by one, the community that my family had dismissed as small-town sentimentalists became my shield. Ethan arrived that weekend, driving all night from Boston. He didn't say much when he saw the wreckage, the poisoned orchard, the scorched greenhouse fans, but he wrapped his arms around me and murmured, I'm proud of you. You fought back the right way. We spent the next week working side by side, clearing debris and pruning dead branches from the apple trees that might still be saved. The air smelled of rot and renewal at once. One afternoon, a woman with silver-streaked hair and university ID badges hanging from her neck approached the farm gate. Jennifer Walsh, Vermont State University, she introduced herself. We've been following your story. What you endured, it shouldn't have happened, but it's inspired something. She explained her proposal, an educational partnership between the university's Sustainable Agriculture program and my farm. Students would intern here, assist in soil recovery, and learn firsthand how to restore poisoned ecosystems. The university would fund infrastructure upgrades, classroom space, organic certification, remediation projects. This could be a living classroom, she said. You'd teach by doing, just like your grandfather did. I laughed softly. Grandpa used to say I could talk soil chemistry before I could ride a bike. Then this place is perfect, Jennifer replied. The first team of graduate students arrived 3 weeks later, led by Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a soil remediation specialist who spoke about fungi the way poets speak about music. She crouched beneath a dying apple tree, gently scooping soil into her palm. Herbicides like these can break down, she said, if we let nature teach us how. We'll use mycorremediation, mushroom mycelium, to absorb and neutralize toxins. It'll take months, but you'll see green again. That afternoon, I watched 20 students in work gloves spreading mushroom inoculant across the orchard floor like a prayer. I'd spent weeks associating this place with betrayal, but now every footprint meant healing. Ethan joined in, hauling bags of compost and teasing the students. You city folks are earning your blisters today, he joked. Someone asked if he worked here full-time, and he smiled, glancing at me. Not yet, he said. That night, I walked the orchard rows alone, flashlight beam tracing the trunks. The damage was still there, leaves spotted, bark scarred, but there was a different pulse beneath it. Survival. Reclamation. When I reached the oldest tree, Grandpa's favorite, the one he grafted from a wild seedling in 1978, I whispered, I kept it safe, Grandpa. At least I'm trying. It's safe, Grandpa. Nah, chicas. The wind answered with a low rustle that felt like a benediction. 2 months passed in a blur of work and unexpected kindness. The university built a small outdoor classroom under a pergola near the orchard. The county newspaper ran a story titled, From Sabotage to Stewardship, Local Farmer Turns Betrayal into Education. Even the same development company Daria once courted reached out again, this time with a different tone. Tyler Peterson, the company's owner, came to see me in person. My daughter's in Dr. Chen's class, he said, looking around the property. She told me what happened here and how you're rebuilding. I've made my living turning farmland into housing. Maybe it's time I help preserve one instead. He proposed funding a permanent education center on the farm, a building with classrooms, a teaching kitchen, and a seed library. In return, we'd establish a conservation easement, ensuring the land could never be developed. For a moment, I couldn't speak. You'd give up millions in potential sales, I said. He nodded. Maybe money isn't the only metric worth measuring. The groundbreaking happened on a warm September morning. The first shovelfuls of soil came up rich and dark, laced with white threads of mycelium, the same fungus healing the orchard. It felt symbolic, destruction broken down into nourishment. Robert stood beside me, leaning on his shovel. Your sister thought she could end this place, he said, smiling faintly. Instead, she planted the seeds for what it's becoming. Ethan squeezed my shoulder. You turned sabotage into legacy, Alexis. I looked toward the half-healed trees, the rows of new saplings planted between them, the students mapping soil samples with clipboards in hand. The farm no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a heartbeat. That evening, when the last of the students left, I sat on the porch steps with Robert. Fireflies floated over the grass. Funny thing about poison, he said. Given time, the earth learns how to eat it. I nodded. Maybe people can too. The restitution money was already at work. Repairs, new irrigation systems, solar panels. But more than that, the land itself was beginning to speak again. Crops were sprouting where only blight had been. The chickens roamed freely, and the orchard hummed with bees. For the first time in months, I felt safe enough to breathe without glancing over my shoulder. Robert took off his cap, running a calloused hand through his graying hair. What will you name the new building? The Theodore Legacy Center, I said. He taught me to plant for generations I'll never meet. Robert smiled. Then he'd be proud, Miss Cole, damn proud. I looked toward the dark outline of the orchard, where the faint glow of moonlight traced the branches like veins. For the first time since Grandpa's death, the silence didn't hurt. It sounded like peace. By spring, the farm had found its rhythm again. The orchard was alive with cautious green. The students returned for a second season, and the Theodore Legacy Center stood framed in sunlight, unfinished but real. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. It happened on a Saturday morning at the farmer's market. The first warm day of April, families everywhere, laughter in the air. I'd just finished arranging baskets of heritage tomatoes and jars of honey when a too familiar voice sliced through the chatter. Well, if it isn't Vermont's favorite fraud. I looked up and there she was, Daria. Hair immaculate, sunglasses perched like armor, speaking loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. You might want to wash your produce twice, she said, waving at the customers. Wouldn't want anyone getting sick. After all, Alexis here grows on contaminated land. Gasps, whispers. My heart hammered. You're violating a restraining order, I said, keeping my voice steady. She smiled coldly. Oh, please. Everyone knows you blackmailed me. You think a little paperwork scares me? I didn't have to say another word. One of my regulars, Detective David Harrison, who usually bought sweet corn for his daughter, stepped forward. Ms. Cole, he said, flashing his badge, that order is active. You just violated it in front of multiple witnesses. And spreading false information about food safety? That's a federal offense when it targets agricultural commerce. Daria's face drained of color as the crowd began filming. Within minutes, she was in handcuffs. The prosecutor took one look at Patricia's meticulously organized evidence from the first case and decided to go all in. This isn't simple vandalism, she said. This is agricultural terrorism. The phrase hit me like thunder, but as the trial unfolded, it fit. The videos, the receipts, the chemical analyses, it was all there, undeniable. Patricia sat beside me through every hearing, calm and unflinching. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, I felt no triumph, only the weight of everything that had to break for truth to surface. Daria was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, and $750,000 in punitive damages. The court also revoked her securities license after the financial division uncovered that she'd taken out fraudulent loans against the farm's projected sale. The headline in the state agricultural press read, "Investment banker convicted of agricultural sabotage, greed versus growing." When I saw it, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. A week after sentencing, I got a call from Mom. "Alexis," she said softly, "your father and we'd like to talk. Just coffee, neutral ground." I hesitated, but curiosity won. We met at a cafe in town, the kind with more succulents than chairs. Mom looked smaller somehow, like the months had folded her inward. "We didn't know," she said, her voice trembling. "Daria told us you were destroying the farm. She had spreadsheets, photos, she made it sound so real." I set my cup down carefully. "And you believed her because it fit the story you already wanted to hear, that I was naive, that only she could succeed." Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've spent my whole life optimizing assets, Alexis. I couldn't see that some things aren't meant to be optimized. They're meant to be tended." I nodded, though part of me still felt raw. "You can visit the farm," I said, "but only for events. Trust isn't soil. You can't just flip it over and expect it to grow back overnight." Mom reached into her bag and placed a small terracotta pot on the table. A single tomato seedling sprouted from dark soil. "I grew this," she said quietly, "from your seeds." It was a small gesture, but it was something. The following week, I returned to the farm with a clearer head. The orchard was greening up fast, bees drifting lazily between blossoms. I had one goal that day, to finish cleaning out Grandpa's old desk in the farmhouse office. The bottom drawer had been jammed for years. When I finally pried it open, a false panel shifted free, and there it was. A letter. Faded ink, folded twice, my name written in Grandpa's steady hand. "My dear Alexis, by now you've likely faced storms that make a Vermont winter look kind. I imagine Daria has made her calls and plans. Your parents mean well, but see the world in numbers, not roots. That's why I chose you. This farm isn't just land, it's a promise. A covenant that people and soil can heal each other if given patience and care. You'll be tested. They'll try to break you, but don't let them. The land will teach you how to endure. When you're ready, look in the old apple cellar, northwest corner, third stone from the left, 4 feet down. Our family has left something there for generations. All my love, always, Grandpa Theodore." I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. Then I grabbed a shovel. The cellar was cool and damp, the stone walls rough under my flashlight beam. I counted 3 stones from the left, pried one loose, and started digging. The blade hit metal after 2 feet, a small, rusted tin box. Inside were packets of heritage seeds, some over a century old, labeled in different hands. Hope, 1897. Sunrise heirloom, Cole Family Apple, 1956. There were handwritten notes, sketches of plant genetics, and a single line on parchment that made my throat tighten. Each seed is proof that survival isn't luck, it's legacy. I sat on the cellar floor for a long time, tears soaking the dirt on my jeans. The seeds weren't just heirlooms, they were instructions, evidence of generations who'd believed that tending life mattered more than selling it. That night, I placed the metal box on my desk beside Grandpa's letter. The moonlight slanted across it, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt not haunted, but accompanied. I whispered, "You left me everything I needed." Outside, the wind moved through the half-recovered orchard, carrying the faint scent of blossoms and promise. Tomorrow, I'd begin propagating the seeds, not for profit, but for preservation. A living archive of everything they'd tried to bury. Grandpa was right. Storms come, families fracture, but roots remember. And so would I. 18 months after Grandpa's death, the farm no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a legacy reborn. The Theodore Legacy Center officially opened on a cloudless June morning. Sunlight spilled over rows of new apple saplings, the smell of warm soil rising as volunteers finished laying gravel paths. There were nearly 300 people here, neighbors, students, farmers, even a few state officials. When I stepped up to the podium under the wooden archway, I could see Ethan smiling in the crowd, camera in hand. Robert, now semi-retired, leaned against a fence post, his weathered hat in his hands like it was church. I cleared my throat. My grandfather used to say that the best fertilizer is the footsteps of the farmer who loves the land, I began. We've had storms, we've had sabotage, but we also had community and the kind of stubborn hope that refuses to die. Applause swelled like wind through wheat. Behind me, the building gleamed, timber frame from our own forest, solar panels glinting, a living roof carpeted in wildflowers. Inside were classrooms, a teaching kitchen, and a seed library built around the very tin box Grandpa left me. Every packet had been cleaned, cataloged, and germinated. We'd successfully propagated 58 varieties, some unseen, for over a century. The Hope 1897 tomato was thriving in raised beds outside, a living symbol of survival. The programs had already begun. Weekly workshops for home gardeners, summer internships for university students, a veterans program teaching agricultural therapy, even an elementary school partnership. Children came every Wednesday to plant, harvest, and learn that food doesn't come from shelves. Our numbers told a story Daria's spreadsheets never could. CSA families served 300, 400. Annual gross, 1.2 million. Full-time staff, 12. Carbon sequestered, 50 tons. Biodiversity increase, 300%. And not a single acre turned into corn or condos. The most ironic twist? The exact income Daria once promised through industrial farming, we'd matched it through sustainable practices. Profit with purpose. But the real transformation wasn't measured in money. It was in people. Ethan and I had built something steady between us, rooted, like the land. After everything that happened, he never once tried to fix me. He just stayed, learned, listened. His ex, Marissa Vale, eventually apologized, saying Daria had manipulated her too. I didn't hold on to resentment. I had too much life ahead to waste on ghosts. Mom and Dad started showing up at community events. At first, they hovered on the edges, unsure. Then, week by week, they found ways to belong. Dad taught a short workshop at the center, basic farm accounting for small growers. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He laughed afterward, saying, "Guess I finally found an optimization worth doing." Mom began running this farm store 3 days a week. She labeled jars of honey, arranged baskets of heritage vegetables, and proudly corrected anyone who called them heirloom tomatoes. "These," she'd say, tapping a fruit the color of sunrise, "are Hope 1897s. My daughter brought them back from extinction." We still weren't the kind of family that hugged easily, but the silence between us had softened. It no longer felt like the quiet before an argument. It felt like peace growing in the cracks. 6 weeks after the center opened, I received a letter from the USDA. Our farm had been selected as a regional demonstration site for climate-smart agriculture. A 5-year grant to study and replicate our soil restoration model. Scientists would analyze carbon sequestration, water retention, and pollinator recovery. It felt surreal. The same farm they once called a failure was now a national example. One evening, after a long day of workshops, I walked to the orchard alone. The sun was melting behind the hills, bathing the trees in gold. I could see bees moving lazily between blossoms. The hum was like a hymn. At the base of Grandpa's favorite tree, I knelt and placed a small plaque that read, "This orchard stood through sabotage, seasons, and silence, because love, like roots, remembers how to survive." I ran my palm over the bark. "We did it," I whispered. Somewhere in the branches, a bird answered. That fall, National Geographic featured us in an article titled "Farms Fighting Climate Change." They photographed the sunrise harvest, 12 workers moving through mist, baskets filling with food that would reach families within hours. When I read the printed piece, I cried, not for fame or recognition, but because it captured something no one else ever had, the quiet defiance of staying when everyone tells you to sell. 2 months later, I hosted the first Heritage Seed Festival at the center. Farmers from across New England came to exchange seeds and stories. During the event, a young student named Michael, one of Dr. Chen's interns, approached me with a grin. "I'm buying 10 acres next spring," he said. "I'm going to start my own sustainable farm, using everything you taught me." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Then this is the harvest Grandpa meant," I said. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone on the porch with a cup of tea. The lights from the center glowed soft across the field. The wind carried the faint scent of clover and apple blossoms. For the first time, I didn't hear Grandpa's voice anymore, and that felt right. His lessons had become instinct, his presence woven into every decision, every seedling. I thought of Daria, now serving the last months of her sentence. The anger was gone. What replaced it was a kind of quiet pity. She'd traded meaning for money and lost both. Maybe someday she'd see what the rest of us had learned, that the only wealth worth keeping is what you grow, not what you hoard. When dawn came, I walked the fields, dew shining on my boots. Chickens murmured awake, the orchard shimmered, and the world felt impossibly alive. This farm had survived greed, betrayal, and loneliness, and in doing so, it had taught me what survival really meant. It wasn't endurance, it was transformation. Every tree, every student, every seed whispered the same truth Grandpa left behind. Some things can be cut down, poisoned, burned, or buried. But if their roots run deep enough, they rise again stronger. And so, under the soft Vermont sun, I smiled and whispered back, "We rise."